1994. Ms. Jan Moss is the Executive Director of the National Association of Therapeutic Schools and Programs, created in January of 1999. NATSAP, is that correct? NATSAP is a 501c6 not-for-profit trade association that represents therapeutic schools, residential treatment programs, wilderness programs, and other similar programs. Moss.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. McKeon, members of the committee, good morning. I am Jan Moss. I am a mother of 2 grown children and a grandmother of 3. To those of you who have spoken today of your devastating losses, I express my condolences, respect, and utmost deference. I have not suffered the loss of a child. I do, however, have a nephew who suffered abuse in an offshore program. I am here as the Executive Director of the National Association of Therapeutic Schools and Programs, generally known as NATSAP.
Moss, it's my understanding that 3 of the facilities that Mr. Coots just mentioned are NATSAP members. Is that correct? They remain
yes.
Open? And those are which?
Catherine Freer, Red Rock Canyon, and Aldrich Academy.
Aldrich Academy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just asked the chairman kind of what he plans on doing about this. It's the first I've heard of these abuses going on. I have a couple of friends that have sent their children away to schools and didn't have any of these kind of problems. But 1 death is more than should be tolerated. Question. Ms. Moss, in your report, you talk about a Joint Commission, 15,000 programs. Was that correct?
The Joint Commission accredits over 15,000 health care
programs such as these?
Yes. Not all like these. There are psychiatric hospitals, medical hospitals. So it's over 15,000 that they accredit.
How many of these programs are in your association?
Of the that are accredited by joint commissions?
Well, just how many are in your program?
We have 180 programs, sir, as members of our organization.
And do you know how many children are enrolled in these programs, these 180?
The information that I received last year when we did our 2006 annual renewal is that there were approximately 16,000 children served in our programs, in our member programs during 2006. 16,000.
Do you have any idea how many deaths have come from those 180 programs or out of those 16,000 youth?
In 2006, sir, I don't recall immediately. Our organization has grown from a starting point of 6 programs to the 180 this year. I'm sorry, I don't have that information at my hand right now.
Mr. Cutts, do you have any idea from your investigation how many deaths have resulted from these programs?
No, we don't. We just know that there are thousands of cases of reported death and abuse. There is no real central repository.
Excuse me again. Thousands of
death and abuse, mostly abuse, but there are other reports of death. There's just no way to quantify. There's no good centralized source in the federal or state governments to quantify this.
It's amazing to me. As the chairman said, if a parent just were reported abusing a child, the children would be taken away from them. They'd probably go to jail. And they'd have to prove their innocence. And yet here we have, just from the witnesses here today, 3 deaths. And it looks to me like there's no criminal action taken except in the case where we had a $5,000 penalty and some kind of probation or something. What are the police doing about this? I mean, deaths are pretty serious, and nobody's taking any action?
Well, I can just answer this. For the 10 cases, we did look at police reports. There were extensive investigations done in most of the cases, And again, it ranged from only one person is serving time today from case study number 6 for manslaughter and I believe another charges, concurrent 6- and 5-year sentences. Everyone else, as I mentioned, either was prosecuted and or pled, either got community service or time served or some lesser charge. So there was really no teeth behind the investigation. Doesn't mean they weren't good investigations. We didn't really evaluate the quality of the investigations, but there was really no action on the criminal side here.
This just boggles my mind. I can't even imagine how this, Mr. Bacon.
A final question, Ms. Moss. You mentioned 180 programs that are currently members.
Yes.
And in your testimony, you talked about they have to have a state license or a accreditation from
Mental
the Joint
health
Commission.
accreditation. Yes, sir.
So all 180 of your programs have that?
The board ruling went into effect the 1st of May, where all new members have to be licensed and or accredited, and they also have to have oversight by a licensed clinician. In other words, somebody that has a state licensure. The current members, those that have been members of our organization, have until January of 2009 to obtain that licensure and or that accreditation. And the organization is working with other states as well as with other accrediting agencies to make sure that those accreditations are available. And in 2009, if we have a current member, whether it's a founding member or any other member that has not received that licensure or accreditation, they will not be a member of our organization.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Mawson.
Ms. Morse?
On the question of disclosure, one of the things that we always recommend when a parent calls is they need to check with the state licensing agency to see if there's anything in the background of that program. We also stress the fact that if there is no licensing agency, they need to contact the Attorney General's office to make sure that there's nothing in that background.
But how do we get this information to these parents? I mean, obviously, usually the parents are so distressed by the time they even come to this situation where they're trying to find the best treatment for their child, and there's so many programs out there. Half of them are not even registered with the state. It's kind of hard to guide.
It is very difficult.
They did their due diligence. They looked at all they asked the right questions, and yet they ended up with, unfortunately, their children dying.
I don't think any of our NATSAP programs would be opposed to disclosure on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Moss, you mentioned that when you get a complaint, that you look into that complaint case by case. How many have you proceeded on case-by-case complaints?
Could you clarify proceeded on?
Yes, you stated that when you get a complaint about an organization, entity that belongs to your organization, that you examine that complaint or proceed on a case-by-case basis.
Right.
That was your words. How many have you proceeded on a case?
As far as closing down, they were canceling their membership, sir. The two that we would have canceled their membership were closed prior to cancellation of the membership.
So have you proceeded on any of these complaints case by case?
We did evaluate the Catherine Freer and the Aldrich Academy cases. There was no criminal negligence found and no wrongdoing found, sir. Therefore, they remained members.
So there's one or two, then, that you have proceeded on a case-by-case basis at all?
On the ones that have been reported to us, yes, sir. In this case, in the deaths, yes.
There's only been one or two reported to you?
Right, on the deaths. The others that have occurred, sir, we have received the reports on those, and also have found no negligence, no wrongdoing, no criminal action found.
But again, you've only received one or two complaints, and you stated that you proceed on a case-by-case basis. It didn't take very long, then. It's only one or two, then.
Sir, I misunderstood the question. I thought you were referring to the ones here in this hearing.
No,
there have been others.
I'm referring.
Yes, sir, there have been others. I don't have the numbers that we have.
Do you have any idea about how many you proceeded on a case?
During my tenure, sir, there's probably been about 5 or 6.
Could you supply the records of that case-by-case, those case-by-case interviews to this committee?
I can certainly try to do that, sir, yes.
Well, I need more than try.
Okay, yes, sir, I can do that.
All right. Because if we don't, Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that we subpoena the records then, but if you...
I will provide them to you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Would that send you a signal as a trade association, Ms. Moss, that something might be amiss if people haven't paid their rent for years?
Yes, sir.
So what have you done in that situation?
I haven't paid their rent for the federal land.
Yeah.
We're not familiar with what programs operate on federal land or not, sir. So if they did not pay their membership dues, their membership is
So
canceled.
it's all about the membership dues.
No, sir, it is not. It is not.
Well, I'm trying to figure out what else it's about because you can't find any evidence of abuse. You don't know the financial situations. I'm just trying to figure out what your association is about.
If there is findings of wrongdoing, sir, or criminal action taken, or ethical violations.
By outside organizations.
Yes, sir, we do not do
You don't do your own investigation.
We do not do our own investigations, sir.
You don't do your own looking at the quality of these organizations.
No, sir, we do not.
Essentially self-certify.
They are not certified by our organization. We are not an accrediting agency. We're not a licensing
What the
agency.
hell do you do?
We are a trade organization, sir, that is focused on improving the field of therapeutic schools and programs.
Isn't that marketing?
Well, but as I read your testimony, and correct me where I'm wrong, you say that these programs that you don't, we proceed on a case-by-case basis, either requiring the program to implement change. Where have you done that?
There have been ethical principles, ethical violations that have been filed with us, ethical complaints that have been filed with us. In one case, there was a marketing issue that there was a misstatement on their website. We investigated that. We found that to be true, or not investigated it. We researched it, talked to them, and they removed that false advertising on their website. So they did make the corrective action.
Okay. Anything else on their website and that marketing thing set off any bells and whistles for you?
I do not evaluate their marketing, sir.
So, and you've canceled memberships?
Counsel them, sir?
Canceled.
Have we? Yes, we have, sir.
For what purposes?
For an ethical violation. Primarily, most of the cancellations have come after they've lost their license.
Okay. So this would be a violation of your principles of best practices that you testified to in your statement. Is that what it is?
Yes. I'm sorry, sir. I'm not understanding the question.
Well, I'm trying to figure out what the ethical violation is. Kids dying and being abused in a rather wholesale fashion, and you say that there's been a cancellation or there's been somebody had something wrong on their website, and that violated the ethical standards. I just wonder where abuse of children falls in those ethical standards.
Sir, we look to the third-party investigators to advise us as to what the actions were taken, what their findings were on these investigations.
So essentially, you're an organization where these people self-certify that they will adhere to the principles of your best practices, which are based on 12 ethical principles which were formulated using the standards of the Joint Commission. So it's not like they're adhering to the Joint Commission. They're self-certifying that they'll adhere to 12 ethical principles that were formulated with those standards in mind.
Yes, sir, but we require the licensure and accreditation. I have to have the license on file. We look to the state, sir, not to this association.
What kind of license do you have to have on file?
We have to have a mental health agency license on file or an accrediting agency, which is a mental health accrediting agency. Those are our new membership requirements.
Are there schools in your program that are members of your trade association that do not have those requirements because they're not required by the state?
At this time, that is true, sir. That will not be true in 2009, as of January 1st of 2009. That's why we've been working so hard.
If they're not in a state that doesn't require this, they will no longer be eligible.
They will no longer be eligible
For
for membership.
Do they have to have also? Do they have to have a license from the Department of Education?
Could you state that again?
Well, if they're some of these programs represent that they're also doing schooling at the same time. Do they have a license from the Department of Education?
Most of them do, sir, that do offer high school credits or high school diplomas, but that will no longer be accepted as an accreditation or a licensure within our organization.
But would they have to then have both? Would they have to have mental health and education?
If they offer high school credits and a high school diploma, they will have to be accredited by an academic accrediting body. The licensing will depend upon the state, sir. I'm not familiar with all of the educational licensing, so I believe that would happen on a state-by-state basis. Some states require that the private schools are licensed, others do not.
Mr. Coots, what did you find in you don't get very far in training before you tell people how dangerous and fatal dehydration can be, especially if you have a program that's designed to be in the desert. I mean, I don't get the ethical standards here or the professional standards of the training where people would not recognize and prevent, in fact, prevent the dangers and the fatalities related to dehydration. I mean, this is like Care 101.
Sir, this is the first we have heard of the circumstances of these deaths. We will take these back to the board and we will review them in depth.
Mr. McKeon said there's a lot of room here for something in terms of oversight. I also serve on the resource. McKeon or Mr. Kildee. Mr. Kildee?
Just another question to Ms. Moss, and I do look forward to some documentation that you'll supply us as how you responded in a case-by-case basis to complaints or information you had received. But what do your members gain by joining NATSAP?
They gain continuing education with our conferences. They gain the journal. They gain access to others in this profession. They gain insight into the newest clinical studies. There are many clinicians in our organizations that present at our conferences. It's basically an education type of benefit with this. With the new research initiative they will gain from that, they will be able to...
What have they? How many conferences do you have a year?
We have one national conference a year, and we have 6 regional conferences a year.
It would seem that much of what they may gain, and this is what I worry about, is that they may gain a certain credibility, that you belong to this, this good housekeeping group. This is not, I don't think your group exactly is comparable to the good housekeeping seal of approval, but I think that can be used as an advertising thing. We belong to NATSAP, and obviously we are good. I think you have something to prove to this committee and to the American public that you are supplying more than just credibility to these groups that belong to you. And I worry about that. I think very often people see a national organization and feel it is something like the good housekeeping seal of approval. I think you have a long ways to go before you ever approach that. I think what I worry about is that you supply them just credibility.
Sir, that is why we are here asking for your help in state licensure and regulation. We do not want to be the good housekeeping seal of approval. We want to supply services to our members so that they can improve the care that they give to children and families.
Congressman, could I just add one thing?
Yes.
In the marketing materials, and again, this isn't NATSAP's responsibility, but these entities do market themselves as being members of NATSAP, and it does provide some credentials for them, even though they're a trade association, so they're not really required to do due diligence necessarily. So that is something we saw in the marketing materials for many of our case studies that were NATSAP members or other members of other associations or whatever the case may be.
But they could, an organization could use that in their advertising. We're a member of NATSAP, right?
They did. Not could, they did.
And so it is used, and it does give them a certain credibility, perhaps, to the people
Someone
who
who might not be aware of what it exactly means, yes.
But it sounds good, right, that they belong to this
It sounds good.
national organization.
If I could comment, because I do receive calls from families on a weekly basis at this point, and this point is absolutely what I'm hearing from families, that they are having such difficulty because there is not a place that they can go on the web or some kind of a clearinghouse where they can get information about programs, both good programs and programs of concern. And so they are desperately trying to make sense based on the information that's out there. And absolutely, when you have a seal on a website that's the Joint Commission seal, and right next to it you have a NATSAP logo seal, I have heard multiple parents saying, yes, but it's a NATSAP affiliated program. It's a NATSAP accredited program. So even though NATSAP says we are not about accreditation, that's how parents are making sense of it. And I am seriously concerned about the mixed messages that are going to families, because although NATSAP is saying that they are trying to help families, I do not understand why, when NATSAP attended a presentation that Paul Lewis, myself, and several other individuals made last year at the American Psychological Association conference, where we indicated that there were hundreds of reports of mistreatment and abuse in these kinds of facilities. Why was it that after that presentation, when NATSAP representatives came up and expressed such concern and said something very similar to what Ms. Moss just said, when she just said, well, we will take these back to our board and review them in depth? That was the same kind of language that we got last year. And what was the response? The response was the open letter to critics that now is on the NATSAP website that describes the concerns that we have reported in these presentations at the APA and elsewhere as, quote, the noisy complaints of a few individuals. So that is not sending a message to families that NATSAP takes these reports of abuse seriously. And I have not seen evidence that they have done anything in response to what we have made very clear in the presentations that we've done over the last 2 years, that this is something that is a great concern to them.
But I think we're all concerned up here. I think we're all parents up here, and I can't imagine the pain the three parents have suffered. But really, if you belong to an organization that deals with the most vulnerable in our society, the youth, you should be part of the solution and not part of the problem.
Sir, that's why we are here. We want to be a part of the solution.
Go ahead.
We want to be a part of the solution. That is why we are here.
But I hope then that you supply us the information I requested, and I yield back the balance of my time, Mr. Chairman.
Again, I mean, this is not to make this NATSAP's problem, but you got 5 out of 10 deaths here that are facilities that belong to your organization. 2 of the 5 have been closed. 1 has had additional deaths since Erica Harvey. I mean, this is like Casablanca. You're shocked that gambling's going on here. Something's very wrong inside of a trade organization. One of the things trade organizations have to decide is you got to get rid of the frauds, and if you want to survive, and somehow something's wrong here in the review or the applications or the self-certification or something that people can bring this kind of history and just continue on. Now, maybe that's fine. You're obviously making a determination. You're leading this committee to believe you're making changes, but I just say that there's a period of years here when somebody was asleep at the switch here, and I appreciate the 3 testimonies that were attached to Ms. Moss to your testimony. 3 statements by people who had been through different programs and their success, and that's what every parent would wish for. I find that terribly interesting, but not terribly relevant, because that would be the expectation of people who signed up for these programs. That would be their hope. Not that every kid's going to come back successful as they've decided, they've gone on with their lives, they've become productive, and they've done those things, but that your child would get treatment. At a minimum, you would expect there to be safely kept while they were in care, and that minimum was breached here time and time and time. In fact, thousands of times that has been breached by people taking care of these children. And so I guess that's why we're here when things go terribly wrong, and I think Ms. Pinto has pointed out much of this behavior or being subjected to this, people don't lightly disgorge to others that they were abused or that they couldn't cut it or they couldn't do these things. And so I think to have people come back now in the numbers that have, and to talk about it, this can't be dismissed as noise.
No, sir, it cannot be dismissed as noise, and I agree with that. NATSAP would benefit from a clearinghouse of information as much as a parent and family would. We do not want to be the good housekeeping seal of approval. We do want to raise the bar in the industry. We are a young organization learning as we're going. We have made mistakes in the past. We recognize that.
There's some duty of care here.
Absolutely, sir, I agree with that.
I think you're missing it, with all due respect. You can decide for the moment, but I think you're missing it. There's some duty of care here, quote, as a trade organization, about what happens in your name.
I will take that back to the board, sir, very definitely.
It's going to be a very busy board. You're taking
Yes, it is, sir. Very busy.
Okay. And Ms. Morrison, just to finish off of one thing I've learned since being here in Congress, I also sit on financial services. And when a trade organization puts their name out and gives the seal of approval of a corporation or an entity that they're supporting, the only thing they have is their reputation. And if you're supporting that reputation, those clients or family members usually will look at that and think that you've already done the investigation. So whether it's your fault or not, I think you need to look at your organization and maybe possibly decide that you might should be doing some of your own investigation if you want to keep your reputation. With that, I yield back.